Okay, guys. So I was John Delarose, and well, if you guys have any questions that are left over from, unfortunately, he had to go early, but I'm going to keep being here for a little while longer and talking very briefly about my long-standing career as an internet shitlord. So I became the RPG pundit essentially in 2005. I don't know the very exact date, but it was around this time. So I've just decided that this, I know it's this year, so I've decided this is going to be the 20th anniversary episode. And it started with me being pissed off at some of the trends that I was seeing on internet forums, specifically RPGNet, and in some parts of internet culture where they were already starting way back then to introduce leftist elements that were getting in the. They were starting to get into the hobby, right? And so I ended up making a blog on Zanga.com, which if you are under 30, you have no idea what that is, but it was one of the many blogging sites that existed at the time. And I started writing critically about the state of the RPG hobby. So I ended up probably one of the first things that well, there were kind of two things that caught the attention. The first was that I was when the RPG Blue Rose came out, which was in many ways it was like the first woke RPG, right? It was like an RPG that was a fantasy world based very much on what leftist policy was at that time, right? Which by today's standards would probably be fairly mild, but it was already like a very kind of anti-democratic sentiment, and it had the bad guys were basically Christians, and stuff like that. And so I was very, very critical of that setting and its stupidity. But the other thing that is perhaps much more significant even today, one of the first things that got people's attention was an essay I wrote in that blog about lawn crappers. And what that was about was that I had noticed that there were people getting into the RPG hobby that weren't actually interested in RPGs. They were interested in other stuff. And that stuff usually had nothing to really do with Dungeons and Dragons or things like that. It had to do with sometimes just stupid and sometimes problematic political issues, right? And my essay was saying this: well, if you live in a neighborhood and in that neighborhood there's a guy who decides that for whatever reason, he's got a fetish or something, he decides he's going to poop on his lawn instead of in his bathroom, right? And just like as if he was a dog or something, just going to crap in his own lawn, and nothing is done about that. Then at some point, some other guy that likes to poop on his own lawn is going to come along, and he's going to see this guy doing that. He's going to say, wow, this is a place where I can come here and crap on a lawn, and nobody's going to have a problem with that. And so he's going to move into this neighborhood, not because he loves the neighborhood, because he loves the idea of being able to poop on a public lawn, in his front lawn where everybody will see him, right? And pretty soon, you're going to get more people that do that. And eventually, you're going to have these guys taking over the neighborhood, right? And crapping all over everybody's lawn. And that if you don't maintain, nowadays they would call that the broken windows theory in some way, right? But this was before I had heard of that. And so this was my argument against the presence of like some of these people that were already there promoting like gender theory and furries and all of this stuff in the RPG context, and promoting radical leftist politics in RPGs, right? And that ended up making a real name for myself, and for many years I was basically a blogger. I became very well known for reviewing books that were sent to me that I would do review, written reviews on my blog. And when the OSR came along, I eventually, oh, thank you very much, Space Zeus. That's a $20 super chat. Thank you so much. 20 for 20 years. I appreciate that very much. Thank you, and that will help go to the Domino cat toy fund. I have no idea where Domino is right now. It's warmer now, so she's probably outside playing. But I'm surprised she hasn't come here all this time. I hope she's well. No, she's fine. I know her. If anything, it's the other cats that have to worry. So I was doing a lot of work as a reviewer. I'd made a lot of commentary on the state of the hobby, criticized things like the Ennies, which were bad even before they became woke, right? And the whole time I was fighting against kind of story gamers and the Forge. And when 4th edition happened, right, I realized that they were using the Forge theory. They were basically trying to create a gamist game out of the GNS theory of the Forge. And I predicted that 2/3 of the audience of current D&D would abandon that game, right? And 4E happened, and meanwhile I started writing some RPGs. I wrote a few RPGs that are probably not really all that memorable, and then I did Lords of Olympus, which was an homage to Eric Wujcik and Amber, which is also, it's a diceless RPG. It's not OSR. It's a diceless RPG that is based on Amber diceless role-playing. And after that, I did Arrows of Indra. And by that time, 5th edition was announced. And there's this guy, Mike Merles. Mike Merles had been a commentator and a follower of my blog since the Zanga days. And so he knew me very well. And he had a very good impression about my ability to review RPGs and to analyze, the structure of the game and what it did well and what it did badly. And he was also aware of the prediction I had made about 4E, which turned out to be exactly right. And so there, he hired me to be his consultant, his primary consultant, basically, for 5th edition. And I had a lot of influence in the overarching concept of 5e. I wasn't like working on specific rules, though I did promote and defend or sometimes reject certain rules, right? Like if I hadn't been there, it's not necessarily sure that they would have gone full on with the advantage and disadvantage mechanics. I had pushed, and I know that a lot of you probably don't like those mechanics, but I had seen that would be a kind of killer app for casual players, where instead of having to like add and subtract stuff, they just had to roll the dice. Like that makes a very big difference for the casual players, which is one thing that you really want to get if you are like the big game that will be attracting casual players. And so I said, no, you have to go all in on that, right? Because at the time they weren't sure if they were going to use part of it or none of it or just sometimes or whatever. I said, no, go for it, right? And I think that was probably one of the biggest features of gameplay that made 5e so approachable for so many people. Again, it's not the game I would want to play. It's the game that I realized that Wizards of the Coast should want to make, right? So I did all that and made some good money there. And then after that, I started getting more serious about writing RPGs. And I guess it was around 2014 or so that I started this YouTube channel, right? And because blogs were dying, and I realized, I started seeing like the numbers of people reading my blogs were way down. And I saw that there were some other people who were already talking about RPGs on YouTube. And I said, okay, I'm going to do that. I did that. I was on Twitter also. And all along the way, especially from 5th edition onwards, right? Like when 5th edition came out, and this was 6 months before Gamergate, there was something called Consultant Gate, right? Where the day that the player's handbook was in print and my name was on it, and also Zach Smith's, right? But it doesn't matter. My name was on it, right? There were a group of people that were trying to call for a boycott of D&D because of the two of us. and you know, people that were calling for D&D to denounce me, for Mike Merles to denounce me, all of this sort of stuff, and it failed. And a lot of those people who had originally been people who hated D&D and wanted 5th edition to fail, they would have tried to find some other way to tank it. When they saw that D&D was becoming so successful, they changed their tune and then infiltrated it, right? So in a way, you know, I won the cancellation attempt, but they ended up taking control of D&D, and then they ruined it eventually, you know. But meanwhile, I went on to make all of my various games, which I think most of you probably know pretty well. And well, here I am. And I think, you know, the best thing somebody already asked me what was the best thing about, you know, my 20 years is my success. But the thing I'm most grateful for is the fans, right? Because like I pointed out earlier in my conversation with John, there was a long time where I was the only guy who was actually speaking up, right? And I can tell you, I'm not going to name names, right? But I can tell you that there were a lot of game designers and people working in the RPG field that were in touch with me privately, but they didn't dare say things publicly, right? And they were, you know, they were cheering for me, but they were too afraid to do it themselves. But I had a loyal group of readers from the blog era onwards, and then viewers, and obviously much more by the time I was in YouTube, because by then there were more people standing up. By that time, there were other people that were doing similar things to what I had done, right? But it was like the first 10 years or so, there were very, very, very few of us, right? It wasn't until around 2012 at the earliest that you started seeing other people that were doing kind of the same things I was doing now, right? So the other thing I'm very grateful for is you guys, is the fans. I'm not sure if there's anybody watching right now who has been around long enough to have like read my original blog or the blog that replaced it after that, because, you know, when Xanga went broke, I switched to Blogger. And if you're one of those guys from the old crew, the OGs, right, then I especially thank you. But if you're a new guy, this is like the first time you're watching me, maybe, you know, you saw something that John posted and you came to look, well, welcome aboard, you know. And there's nothing that I'm more grateful for, rather than proud of, but grateful for, is all of the guys who have been, you know, supportive and on my side, and who like my games, right? And I my hope is that, you know, if you buy my games because I'm based, well, great, right? But my hope is that you enjoy those games as well, and I think that most people do, you know. Diversion Drive says Nutkinland represent, yeah. Well, Nutkinland used to be the name of the RPG site. Yeah, that's one thing I missed in my story. At one point, there was a competitor to RPGNet that was originally called the RPG site. Then they changed their name to Nutkinland. And then the owners kind of gave up on it and it was dying. And I did a blog post where I said that, you know, it's a shame because this was supposed to be a free speech alternative to RPGNet, and you guys kind of dropped the ball. And the owner of Nutkinland contacted me, and he said, "Oh yeah, well, I'd like to see you try. I'd like to see you do as well." And I said, "Well, I don't know, give me Nutkinland and then I'll tell you, right?" And so he gave it to me, and there were people saying, "Oh yeah, this is going to be dead in 6 months," right? And I changed the name back to the RPG site because Nutkinland is a stupid name. It doesn't explain what it is. And it is still going on today. It is still a fairly thriving discussion forum for RPGs that is, you know, within the context of RPGs, right? Not for talking other things, but within the context of RPGs, it's a free speech site, right? You go there, you talk about RPGs, and it's an excellent site if you're not aware of it. The link is in the description to this video.